think of a time when maybe you didn't follow your intuition and see what the
Mhm.
consequences were. And often we learn from failure, or what drives us forward is often pain, isn't it? So it's much
Yeah.
easier to think of a time when, oh, I wish I'd listened, or I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd followed my gut, rather than me telling you to think of a time when you did and it all worked out.
If you're finding value in what you're watching, consider hitting the subscribe button and turning on the bell notification. Oh, and don't forget to drop a comment. I love hearing your thoughts and ideas. By the way, we have got a ton of other videos waiting for you. And if you are ready to level up your mindset, come hang out with us in our private Facebook group called Mindset for Business Success. Welcome to Super Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Shahid Durrani. Today we have with us Dr. Rana Al-Falaki. She's the co-founder of the Nail It system, designed to help high achievers find their elusive balance between success and well-being. With over 20 years of experience and a best-selling book to her name, Dr. Rana combines her personal journey with her expertise to guide leaders in mastering optimal performance. So let's welcome her to our show. How are you?
I am amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Shahid. It's a real pleasure.
No, my pleasure. So great, the kind of work that you're doing. It's so needed. What happens is we go after what we want. For the ones that know what they want, we go after it. And then when we start to get there, or we get there, we realize this is not it. Why do I still feel this way? So there's a much deeper place that needs the work or our attention more than the outside achievements, which are very important, obviously. But what's the point if we get what we want and we still feel the same after a few weeks of achieving it? Is back to the drawing board. So I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you. Just as you were saying that, I've been asked by my publisher, because I have just written the next book about Nail It, Achieve the Ultimate. And he was saying, just suggest a couple of titles for me. And the best time I find for my intuition to drop in is often when I'm driving, and there's scientific facts and reasons for why we get our best kind of intuitive hits, either when we're driving or in the shower, which we can go into if you want. But it was interesting. What did come to me was actually probably a title of something that simply said, "Is this it?" Because which is exactly what you just mirrored, right? We strive so hard thinking,
Yeah.
this is what I want. And particularly for an entrepreneur, so
Yeah.
driven, often so tunnel visioned, will
Mhm.
work yourself into the ground. And that's great. You have to. But if you don't build yourself up with the resilience, with the possibility of failure, with knowing that a dead end needn't be a dead end, but you need to know how to navigate, how to sidetrack, how to find
Mhm.
opportunity, how to look after yourself, how to keep your energy up, both physically, mentally, emotionally, you'll never really arrive. And just think like, is this it? That's just like the small goal. What's the small goal? What's the big goal? Because the reality is it's usually never a thing, it's a feeling. So how do we find that
Yeah.
feeling in every stage so that we can keep ourselves going?
Yeah. The feeling is super important. Excuse me. I think I'm choking. But the feeling is super I know, but the feeling is super important. But the thing is, we don't pay much attention to the feeling because we get so many different types of feelings. And our school system, for example, we never really learn that side of things, or intuition, especially. And it's great that you brought that up, because so many of us have this powerful aspect to our being that we can utilize. And all it needs is a little practice, a little trial and error, a little spending some time with it to understand the communication style of this, I guess you could say, a superpower that all human beings have, that in tune to it, and then start getting comfortable with those messages that we get. Sometimes they can even tell us yes or no, if you should go for something or we shouldn't. And then when you start trusting it based on your experience, it becomes really incredible because now you're not alone. You have this support that can get you to where you need to go for your highest good. And you don't need to go it alone. You can have that support just by practicing a little bit and getting comfortable with that feeling. I would love to hear from you about the driving aspect of intuition and how it plays a part.
Yeah, I think the first question to ask to get buy-in from anybody is think of a time when maybe you didn't follow your intuition and see what the consequences were. And often we learn from failure, or what drives us forward is often pain, isn't it? So it's much
Yeah.
easier to think of a time when, oh, I wish I'd listened, or I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd followed my gut, rather than me telling you to think of a time when you did and it all worked out. I certainly know for me, some of the biggest, most career driving shifts in my life came from an intuition. So I've learned to
Yeah.
follow them. And you're
Same here.
absolutely right. It is a skill that you
Mhm.
can learn.
Yeah.
This is one of the things in the Nail It system that the I at the end stands for mastering your intuition. And it's what I call the North Star Navigator. So star spelling 4 things of how to achieve it. One is the silence, really needing to silence your brain, which means switching your phone off, which means avoiding distractions, which means giving yourself some mental and emotional space. You have to be able to clear the clutter. But interestingly, you don't actually necessarily want complete silence, because when you have complete silence, what happens is it's like having an empty vacuum. Everything else fills into that space. So actually, if the brain is slightly preoccupied with something else that isn't taxing, that it knows how to do automatically, that's often when intuitions drop in the most. Hence what I was talking about when you're in the shower or when you're driving a car, because you're busy doing something else, but you're not having to think about it. The next part, of course, that you touched on, of course, was trust. And you need to learn to trust, but you also need to recognize when the feeling or the idea is fear based or is too in your head, because we can talk ourselves into anything, can't we? My God, entrepreneurs, we're full of ideas left, right, and center. And it might not be the best idea, but the more we think about it and the more we sit on it, the more we can convince ourselves that it is the right idea or the wrong idea if we happen to sit in fear. So it's very important to learn what that trust is. So one of the things I will often encourage people to do, for example, is to start an intuition journal. So every time you get one of those ideas, one of those hits, write it down, sit with it, see what happens, and just take tiny steps to start with. And the more you realize, actually, yeah, that worked out, it creates that safer platform for you in order to actually then to be able to trust and take the bigger steps and the bigger risks. And you got to be willing to play the game, right? If you're not, there's no point.
Yeah.
So those are two. The other part is the A stands for attachment. So this is about the connection, and you did touch on this as well, the idea, of course, we need to be connected to ourselves, but this idea that we're also connected to so much more. So how can we connect to our bodies, be that simply through breath? How can we connect to nature? How can we feel connected to other people? And if we follow on that, is this all there is, or that sense of disappointment feeling when you've followed all the steps and you haven't quite got to where you wanted to be? Very often I'll hear people say that it's because they just feel disconnected. And particularly on the entrepreneur's journey, that happens a lot, doesn't it? This real sense of disconnection, which can happen for 2 reasons. One, they're too up in the clouds, which is often my case, or they've been going on this guided journey so much that they lose sight of the reason why they're doing it in the first place. So they forget or lose sight with what is really important. And the R, of course, stands for recognize, which we've touched on, that comes further on from the trust. So because a lot of the time in intuition is the same kind of feeling. We talk about it being in the stomach, in the gut, but of course that's where people will often feel anxiety as well. So needing to really recognize, is something a true intuition or not? But it is absolutely our superpower. We do have the answers.
Yeah, so true said. And the thinking aspect of it, like you mentioned, we can talk ourselves into or out of almost anything. And the overthinking can cause that. For me personally, what I did is I really calmed the overthinking aspect of my existence, if you may say. So I give it respect, obviously, as the thoughts, but I created a gap between my awareness and what I'm thinking. So when a thought comes up, I am looking at it more as a witnessing view. And then if the idea is good or not, I'm looking at it that way. I'm not infused with the thought patterns that are coming up, because I know a lot of them are coming from programming, past environmental influence. So for the intuition, what I found is that when we calm in the moment and we surrender to that moment, meaning that say to myself or feel or sense that I'm meant to be here right now. This is exactly where I was supposed to be right in this moment. And then I surrender. And then from there, I just allow thoughts to come, or I ask questions, I allow the feeling. And from there, historically speaking, I have reviewed my intuition and how it nudged me out of some serious, serious trouble. And it brought me towards some great things. So what I did is I remember those feelings. And when they were happening, I mindset happened because of COVID, my transformation. But before that, I just thought of it as a concept. Like many people think of mindset as just something, don't even think of it as an important aspect. Now they do since COVID, but in that time, it was cool to write a post that is motivational. I would write a post about something that motivates, but this is much deeper. When that was happening, I can only go back to that time and recall why I did or didn't do something. It was such a strong feeling, even though I didn't know what that was. But it stopped. I listened because it was like I had to. That's how strong that feeling was. So that feeling, I marry it into now what I know now, and then I play with it, and then I test it. And like you said, that trust comes with that testing, playing and going back and forth. It could be small things. Should I go this way or this way kind of thing? Yes or no. And you start developing to a level where you just start to rely on that a lot more than the programmed thoughts, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And there are a couple of things you touched on there. You talked about your decision making and your thought process, a slight detachment from it. And so I will often get clients to, if they do think something or have a decision or an intuition or an idea, literally picture putting it in the palm of your hand and looking at it. The same as someone might a gemstone. They're going to look and see how the light catches it, or a glass of wine. You're going to see what the color is and how cloudy and how it sticks to the glass. But literally just to look at it and just be curious.
As an object.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And be curious. Yeah, so when we're curious.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that.
That's when we get answers, right? To become a more conscious person is to always be curious rather than to judge and really have understanding. So just be curious and say, oh, you're interesting.
Yeah.
What can
Thanks
you
for joining me.
Yeah. What can you tell me? Where did you come from? And oh, that's great. Tell me a little bit more about that. And what might that look like? And almost just keep asking those questions so that you deepen it. And when you say, where did you come from? You'll start to recognize, oh, did this come from a fear or what?
Yeah.
Because, excuse me, because often an intuition is actually, it's not some woo, it's definitely not an idea, but it's actually, it's in your brain. It's just our conscious brain is incapable of holding on to all that data. So it stores it. It's like the warehouse. So often there is a stimulus that literally has opened the gateway, opens the door to the warehouse, and then the gates flood open and stuff comes in. But what I will also say is, particularly when you're making a much more complex decision, is to balance it out, but not unevenly. Because, of course, when you are stuck in your head, as you said, you detach. But when people are stuck in their head, they really procrastinate. They get stuck. They overthink. They have one very dear friend. And I do coach him occasionally, and he is just in his head 100%. And I try to get him into this
quite common.
Very common. Everything he presents with me is an Excel spreadsheet. all the time. And then you have the feelers, right? The ones who are so stuck in emotion, overpowered, worrying about how they feel, how everyone else
Yeah.
feels, how they might upset somebody, or they start suffering with anxiety, or they want to do something out of love, even though it's really not the right thing to do, particularly in business and
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. So you
Yeah.
have to balance the three. It's what I call holographic thinking. So
Yeah.
imagine a triangle, and at each peak of that triangle, you have your intuition, your heart, and your logic, your emotions and your logic. So how can you gel the three of them together? Which, if you put this on the palm of your hand, those are the questions that you want to be asking in order to
Mm.
enable you to make that decision and take that forward direction.
I like the idea of placing it, imagining it in your hand and just looking at it like, oh, thanks for joining. What do you have to say? Because it creates that gap again. And there's something special, something incredibly special about that gap, about that awareness, because there's, like you mentioned, about anxiety showing up because of the three brains, the one in the skull, we have in the heart, and we have in the gut, and they work together. And you'll feel that anxiety is only because we have some kind of a trauma, right, from our childhood, for example, or inner child needs some love. We need to work on it. But the key is that when you feel it, or when the thought happens, or when the feeling happens, and you're able to have that gap, and you just look at it, oh, hi, welcome. Okay, you're just feeling, yes, you are anxiety. So this situation caused it, and you start looking at it like a consultant would, or you're witnessing. And by the way, my name, the Shahid, meaning is witness. And it's so funny that I was guided to where I am as of today, right now, on this journey from tons of challenges, but on this journey to get here to become a witness. I live just witnessing everything without the judgment still happens, obviously, but that's the ideal state to get to. But just witnessing the thoughts, the emotions, the behaviors, and then others, and what's around, the objects around, just witnessing. And when you have that witnessing look to that feeling or that intense anxiety, and you shine a light on it, and you do that, even sometimes, even that one time, that has happened to me, just that one time was so powerful that it changed it. But if you need to do it multiple times, and you'll start seeing that feeling that you would get on a regular basis, that reaction or that anger, whatever it is, you'll start seeing it'll lose its grip. It will just fall into pieces in front of you. And I don't know if you could speak of the awareness side of our existence, and what does that mean? What is it? But there's something, from my experience, something incredible about it.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? You touched on part of it when you talked about acceptance and surrendering and allowing. It's really about energy, really. It's this conscious state of allowing energy to be able to flow through you. And again, this is something we can, of course, train. For me, that was my journey. I was a crazy workaholic. I called myself a wantaholic, which is because I had this always this feeling of wanting more, and the next
Mhm.
thing and the next thing and the next
Next
thing.
thing.
But eventually it's like a domino effect. Everything else starts to
Yeah.
topple down. So yeah, great, I'm a high achiever. Good for
Yeah.
me. Look at all this money that I've earned, and look at this career success, and look at this next award. And yet there was never a sense of inner fulfillment, inner
Yeah.
peace. And the reality is that's really all we want. Really. And the bottom line is we just want peace. That's what
Yeah.
we want in life.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like how much knocking on the door has to happen before you finally listen. And when
Yeah.
you think of your life, you think of the hardships that you might have been through. We're all familiar with the terms a wake up call. And that wake up
Hmm.
call is exactly that. It is about awakening, becoming
Hmm.
awake. It's an
Hmm.
opportunity. It's your choice if you choose to wake up at that point. But if you don't, the chances are there will be another. It's like hitting the snooze
Hmm.
button on an alarm
Yeah.
clock.
It'll
It's
keep
going to
happening.
go again, and it's going to go
Hmm.
again, and it's going to go again. And then you have to pick up the damn alarm and throw it against the wall. But guess what? It's got power batteries in it, and it's going to keep on going. And so for me, that
Yeah.
was very much my awakening until
Yeah.
in the end I became chronically ill. It was, Rena, we're going to
Mm.
slow you down here because
Yeah.
you're not listening. So for me, my
Hmm.
awakening was actually, okay, you know what? I actually have to finally be me. I have to
Yeah.
be my
Well, I love
authentic
it.
self. I have to be
Yes.
willing to show the world my
Yeah.
craziness, which is, I
You can
loved it when
resonate.
when you greeted me, when we just joined and you had your arms up in the air, and you're like, I'm amazing. I'm like, oh my God, I love this energy. This is like a mirror of myself. And
Yeah.
it's not being afraid for people to see that crazy, not
Mm,
being, and
mm-mm,
not to think, oh, this isn't right and I shouldn't act this way in this situation or around
mm-mm.
these
I
people.
was like that before. Yeah.
I bet. Whereas sometimes
Yeah.
it's just, okay, yeah, we might work in a business world or we might work
Yeah.
in the leisure industry. Yes, okay, there's protocols, but that you can
Yeah.
still show your true self. And when you don't care, because the
No.
people who count are the people who will match the energy and who will come and resonate around you and build you
Mm,
up and allow you to flow. And this is what this is
hmm.
all about, right? In
Yeah.
my first book, I talked about us having, imagine you're going from A to B in life. And when you're first born, you can just go across that ground really flat. And that's easy. But as you have these awakenings, what happens is like you're digging yourself a hole because you're not dealing with stuff. And then you
Mm.
get in the middle of the hole and then the rain comes. So what happens? You have to put Wellington boots on and it's so much harder work to get through this sludge. So how are you going to get through the sludge? And that is, of course, that is the awakening. That's about getting into flow state and allowing it all to flow through you because you have the answers, you have the ability. And when you're in flow state, everything becomes effortless. You are
Yeah.
in tune,
So
you are
true.
connected, you are super productive, you're focused, and
Yeah.
you are
Oh
at
man.
peace.
Yeah. Work doesn't feel like work anymore. You get a sense of energy that is unmatched by any other type of energy because of that flow state. It's getting a good news, for example, habitually just being in that state all the time and not needing a good news because your existence, you being in that moment is the good news. So
Yeah.
it changes everything. Like everything changes. And you mentioned about the awakening. It's a step by step process. You get hit so many times you don't realize what the lesson is here, what is trying to what are you supposed to learn from that challenge or that devastation that happened. I'm not downplaying any of it, obviously, but some of them are really heartbreaking, but they're meant to elevate us, that to realize that we are much grander and more incredible than we can ever imagine compared to any of that. And they're just meant for us to take a step forward in that direction of continuously awakening because there's infinite steps. If somebody says, oh, I've awakened or if I'm there, I don't believe it because I feel like it doesn't end. You just keeps going and going. There's no ceiling to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
concentric circles, isn't it? You
Yeah.
just, if
Yeah.
I think where I was 7 years ago compared to where I
Yeah.
am now, an even more
Yeah.
conscious person, an even more fulfilled person, able to tap into flow even more, feeling
Yeah.
even wiser, more awakened, able
Yeah.
to help more
Yeah.
people. And I sense that
Yeah.
from you as well. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a constant evolution. And it
Yeah.
has to be because otherwise you arrive and then what is there?
Yeah. What is it?
What
There
is there?
always has to be. Yeah. You always has to have those steps. And you mentioned about that effortless feeling, which is priceless, by the way, because I recall the time when everything was a frustration to where I am now. And if I knew that there was a way back then to have that state, I would have jumped on it. I just didn't know, but I had to learn lessons to figure it out step by step to get to that state where you just want to help other people and don't really care about what they think of you, not in a negative sense, but meaning that my mission is way bigger than how you may perceive me or judge me. I am here to do something way grander than that perception that you may have of me. So I'm just going to be me because it's the easiest way. And I love me. So if I love me, I'm going to love me more and I'm going to seep that love outwards to the people that around me in that flow state where they can join that flow state, and it has a ripple effect more and more, spreading all over the world like a good pandemic. And that's what you're creating.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Raising the
Yeah.
consciousness one person at a
Yeah.
time. Very much.
Yeah.
So that nail
Yeah.
it model, what I call optimal performance, is
Yeah.
very, and it's so key for entrepreneurs because we're so
Yeah.
familiar with the terms high performance and peak performance. But the reality is, yeah, you reach that state, but you will burn out because there's nothing feeding you. Whereas if
Yeah.
you reach flow state, which is a big part of optimal performance, you reach it and yet you have other aspects of your life. You radiate outwards. You have fun. You have adventure. You have relationships. You haven't become tunnel vision. You have a sense of peace. You have joy. You have synergy. These are all aspects to optimal performance.
Yeah.
Your productivity, happiness, balance, synergy, flow, joy. All of those 6 components
Yeah.
make up optimal performance, which means you can
Yes.
keep on maintaining it and keep on influencing it. And why are we entrepreneurs? You're an entrepreneur. You're ultimately you're a leader, right? And the
Yeah.
peak of need, if you go by Maslow's triangle of needs, that peak of his triangle is about transcendence. It's about this is more than you. This is more than just about you. And when you truly understand that,
Yeah.
that is your superpower.
Yes. Yes. Unleash your superpower. That's it. There's a great discussion, by the way. I love this. We could go on forever and ever, I can tell, on this topic because you're just so passionate about it. But can you provide some kind of a suggestion or strategy or actions that someone in the audience could take from what they heard about today about the flow state that they can do immediately at home to start feeling or sensing the flow state as an initial step, that they can get some extra value from this episode?
Yeah, yeah. We touched on a couple of things like about keeping
Mm.
an intuition journal. And the other thing I would
Mhm.
definitely share about how to get out of your head is something I call the 5 second rule. And literally before
Mm.
you just literally say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you just take action and just do something. So you
Yeah.
don't get stuck in all the reasons why you should or shouldn't do it. The
Mm.
flow state, it's important to know that you may be in that, oh God, I can't be bothered today. So you need to time block your diary for flow. You need to time block it, knowing that you want about a 2 hour block for flow state. And it typically takes 15 to 20 minutes to get into flow. So you really do just have to start doing something. But then you need to leave yourself enough time because once you're in it, you're really in it. And it can be quite, you need a little bit of grounding time when you get out of it. I would definitely say if you're starting out to put some kind of music on, energize yourself, dance around your living room or your kitchen. Nobody can see. Really get the energy and vibration through your body before you sit down. And then it's great to put some kind of actually theta wave music, which you can download from the internet on, because that really helps to tap into your subconscious. You'll hear it to start with, but then that will settle itself down and then you will really start to focus into the task. So just a couple of little ideas of how to start getting into it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate your time today. Appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. You're doing such important work for all of us. And I wish you all the health and success. And you don't need the strength because you are strong.
Mm.
Just go out there and make the shifts that are necessary to help people live that beautiful life as it was intended. So it really was an honor to chat with you today.
You too, Shahid. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Your opinions.